Hello, everyone, and welcome to Recipe for Reality. And we've got, I believe, 4 or 5 episodes of Survivor to recap.
It's
Um,
something like
yeah,
that.
we get into this funk every year where it's like everyone's either in shows or doing shows for their schools or working crazy Thanksgiving shifts, and then we never get a chance to actually record this show, even though we talk about it on our own separate lives in our own circles, and every day on the Discord I'm talking about Survivor, but we never get to actually record the show. So if you're someone out there who's like, dang guys, I miss your show, like we're gonna get better about trying to
We
do it.
miss you too.
Yeah, we're
Don't
gonna
you
get
worry.
better about getting a fine-tuned schedule. We're gonna plan ahead for next season, try to figure out exactly like a firm date and time we could do for every week. But then Zach will get cast in something, or I'll get cast in something, and it'll all be thrown for a loop, you know. But the good news is, if you head to our Dill Pickle Movie Network Discord, we talk about Survivor pretty much every day in there. So you can come join, not just us, but also just a lot of great friends. Carly, Matt, JD are usually all in there too, talking about Survivor. So if that is a thing you want to do, if you want to just get more thoughts about Survivor out weekly and want a guaranteed space to talk about it every week, check out our Discord. Some other business too, as of today, I have to congratulate the guy sitting next to me and myself, because we are both Broadway World Award nominees, which is a fun thing we look forward to every year. I was nominated as part of the company of A Sunday in the Park with George as the best overall company, and
Louis the Baker, baby.
Louis the
Louis
Baker.
the Baker.
But also our show got nominated for Best Musical, and some of our actors got single acting nominations, Joy and Talia and Graham. Very happy. We got nominees for lighting and sound and set. But also Zach got nominated for Best Actor for Hunchback at the Algonquin Arts Center. So very exciting. I put a link in the description below if you want to go support us. Zach, did Hunchback get nominated for Best Musical as well?
It certainly did. A lot of our cast is nominated.
Cool,
It's
very cool.
It's very fun to be a part of something like this. I mean, the Broadway World Awards are exactly what you make of them. They are very fun and very exciting in the way that you can nominate yourself. You can be nominated by others. I would venture to say that both myself and Dylan did not nominate ourselves.
No, I didn't know you could do that. I thought it was voting based. Okay, so it makes it a little less, prestigious, but it's okay. Like it's about the community, and that's why we put the link in the description for you to vote if you'd like to for Sunday in the Park with George at Axelrod or Hunchback in Notre Dame at the Algonquin Arts. Don't vote for anything else, but besides those two.
Do not vote for anything. If you do, you can never watch this show.
No. We actually have a friend who was nominated for choreography, Maya, for Alice by Heart. So if you go on, just peruse the names. If you know any names or just some titles that sound cool, vote for them. But Zach is eligible to be voted for, so vote for Zach. And then if you would love to,
vote for Dylan's show.
Vote for Sunday in the Park with George for Best Company, because then we each get a little bit of a braggadocious little nod there if we win those. But no, it's just about celebrating community theater and regional theater in New Jersey, everything that's not Broadway in New Jersey. So it's an exciting day because I've never been nominated, and I wasn't directly singled out, but just the fact that my company and my cast got nominated as a whole, like it was just very humbling, and regardless of who or what nominated it. But yeah, vote for your heart, vote for who you want to vote for. If you don't know anyone in the category and don't want to vote, there's a no nominee option, but you might as well vote for somebody. Just pick the one that sounds the most interesting to you. But yeah, go check out those if you'd like to vote for us or vote for anything for the Broadway World Awards for New Jersey. We put the link in the description. And congratulations, Zach. That's awesome. Very proud of you. Have you ever been a Broadway World nominee before?
I have not. I didn't even really know about it until earlier today.
Gotcha.
When someone congratulated me, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
So very exciting, very cool. I mean, like I said before, you can nominate yourself, but it's very cool that even in the fact that you can nominate yourself, to be nominated by somebody else feels very, very nice. Thank you to whoever nominated me. I really appreciate it. It's very fun, very exciting. I love that role a lot. I have a tattoo of it on my chest. It's very fun to. It's very, very fun that Quasimodo is still making his impact.
Yes.
Yeah,
I just want to get that business out in the front because it's something that we can celebrate because we haven't been here talking in a little while.
True.
But Zach, now we got to talk about Survivor because it's been a little while. Last we talked was the Rome boot. So we merged, and then they split everyone up. They split everyone up, and then they merged together, and then they split them up again. They just did a lot of splitting. But we have
5
lost
episodes.
I know
it has been 5 episodes.
We lost Tiana, we lost Sierra, we lost Saul, we lost Gabe, and now we just lost Kyle. So we have gotten 5 boots since then. 5 episodes, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 to talk about, but it's okay. We can kind of, what I was thinking of, maybe just kind of like looking at where we are now, we can kind of talk about each boot and then
Mhm.
talk about each member as we go through our power rankings and like talk about what they've done well up to this point and what they haven't. Because I think this season, more than any other, has shown that even the best players have either very poor
Yes.
gameplay moments or poor edit moments where they'll do something and then the edit will say they're doing something and then they won't get their way, or they will be blindsided, or they'll be left out of a vote, or they'll get a stray vote and we don't really understand why, or they won't get to talk about the moves they made, so it's like an editing red flag. Like there's so many different things that happen that like every single person left has a case to win and has a case against winning. So I think now that we're getting to the nitty gritty, we're 2 weeks out from the start of the finale because it's going to be a 2-part finale.
Which is very fun, very exciting,
Very exciting.
very
I
very
just I just hope there's
cool.
no cliffhanger. Like I hope it's not like they sit down to make fire and then it's a commercial. I hope
Right.
the first half of the finale ends with either the 6th or 5th place boot, and then we get the fire making in final 3, because I think it's going to be a 6-person finale this year also, which is very interesting. Unless they do a double boot next week, I think that's how the math works out, because now there's 7 left, and this is the last episode coming up before the finale. But I figured because we're in this kind of like right before the finale, but like still a little bit ways into the merge, kind of just talk about each contestant and what mistakes they've made or what things they've done well, rather than going week by week, because I think they all kind of start to blend together, especially because of the power shifts. Because if we were to talk 3 weeks ago, we'd be like, oh my God, Genevieve did that. But then the next week, it's like, ooh, was that the right thing to do? And we'll talk about all those things, because as a Genevieve stan, I've got to both prop my girl up, but also be able to indict the bad things she has done so far in her game, as is true with all the contestants. But I do want to give a quick update on our power rankings.
I was gonna say, Dylan, can you share the
Well,
share the Survivor fantasy, please?
Well, I was about to say, I have not updated the graphic for fantasy, but you are way ahead. All of your players are still, I believe, in the game, correct? Or was
They
Kyle on your team?
certainly
No. Yes,
are.
you have Sue, you have Teeny, you have Andy, and you have Genevieve. So you are solid. I don't have that graphic, but this is the power rankings graphic I have. We both had Kyle low pretty much every week, because if you win a lot of immunities, you're always a target. We had Gabe on the bottom for a lot of weeks, so we are still only 8 points apart. I kind of took a big swing earlier this season. I believe it was the Asia boot that I got a little bit of like ahead, pulled ahead a little bit, and the Sierra boot, I believe you had her a little higher up and I had her a little lower, so I pulled ahead a little bit there. But we're only 8 points apart, which is fine, especially going into a finale in 2 weeks. Like anything can happen. But we did both have Kyle pretty low on the list. I kind of just want to really quickly just talk about each of the boots, and kind of give a recap as to what kind of led to each of those boots, starting with the Tiana boot. Obviously, this was interesting because the last time we talked, we had the list of each separate breakdown of who would be on each side, and we thought both tribes were going to tribal, but what turned out being the case was that
It was
one
just
whole
one.
side was safe. So we see Rachel and the Tukus go to tribal, and then we see, of course, Saul find the safety without power to gift another member. Saul gives it to Rachel uses it, and then it just starts utter chaos, and they ultimately settle on going for Tiana as the boot over Gabe. What did you think of this? Now that we've seen kind of the fallout of this, do you think Tiana was the right move? Do you think Saul made the right move saving Rachel? What do you think about this? Because I think this is also the start of Rachel's big prominent story in the season, because she's kind of been a supporting player, but I think this episode where Tiana went home was the one that kind of projected Rachel to the front, because she had this big moment of using the safety without power, getting out of tribal, and then being able to forge a relationship with Saul and other people because of that. But what did you think of this boot? Because Tiana was kind of under-edited, so we didn't really know necessarily where she stood in the tribes, but we knew where Sue, Caroline, and Gabe stood, and Kyle as well, who had immunity.
I didn't think it was so. As a player, I didn't think it did much for altering the like altering our standings of like who we thought was going to win overall at that moment. Now, kind of going back and looking at it, I mean, Tiana herself was not a big enough player to feel very impactful, but like you were kind of like you were talking about, Dylan, like that's the beginning of Rachel's turnaround, and up until this point in the season, Rachel really just feels like fodder, right? Especially given the fact that she was
Annika's number one.
She was Annika's number one, and she had
that.
that whole situation with Andy in the beginning of the season where it was sort of just kind of like, yeah, I mean, like she seemed to be in wrong place at the wrong time. This really propels her forward to being, I mean, she's a pretty big contender to win at this point, I think, and we wouldn't have been saying that at that point. So in terms of a game player, I think Tiana's kind of like and what it also didn't do, in the fact that there was only one tribe going to tribal that night, you only have one side really in need of kind of like showing any sort of cards. And I mean, if it's been such a long time, I couldn't tell you who was on the other tribe. I'm sure that you could.
Yeah.
But the fact that, I mean, Tiana going home and being the Tuku that leaves, because then what did we have up until that point? We had Gabe, we had Kyle, we had Caroline, and Sue. I mean, taking out Tiana, I guess, makes the most sense.
Yeah, especially because Kyle had immunity. If Kyle didn't have immunity, I could have seen a world where they go for Kyle instead. I think from the beginning, I've said that whole second vote where Tiana flips on TK, I think it hurt Tiana, but also I don't think she had many options, because when you have a strong three, Caroline, Gabe, and Sue on a tribe of 6, like I said, if Tiana goes against them, it's rocks and she could go home second, or she takes the risks and flips, but she's still bottom of the 4. So I think wherever Tiana was, she was between a rock and a hard place. I just think because she did flip, I don't think she realized that she was 4 on the totem pole. I think she always thought Gabe was below her and that she was with Sue and Caroline closer than Gabe was. And I think that was mostly the biggest misplay for Tiana, was understanding how close Gabe was with the other women, because I really think Tiana was blindsided, because I think it was just like, oh, good, me, Sue, and Caroline are going to vote out Gabe now. It's easy. And that was heart-wrenching to see. Obviously, she's crying. It was a very emotional boot. If you're Saul, do you think Rachel was the right person to send that safety without power to, because she was the only oh my gosh, I'm forgetting their name, Gata left on that side? Or do you think you go for a blue and just force them to take out Rachel and then keep Tuku as a big conglomerate to get out the next time? Because I think that's kind of also been a story of the season, is this Tuku majority. Do you go for someone outside the majority, or do you go for the majority and let them just kind of make bigger threats of themselves later? Do you think Saul made the right move?
I mean, in hindsight, the better move would have been to get Rachel out. But I mean, at that point in time, I can see why utilizing the idea of like forcing the Tukus to kind of turn on each other is a really good standpoint, especially because for Saul, what that means is you get Rachel, you have the credit of being able to take out one of the Tuku at that point in time, which can be seen as like a big power shift and a big power move.
Yeah.
In the long run, clearly doesn't work out for the best, because Saul doesn't utilize it correctly.
Right.
Is the problem. He has the ability to be like, this is all me. This is all happening because of me. And rather than doing that, I mean, he kind of sticks to what he knows and then some. And that sort of just, it plummets his winner equity. And why is anyone going to keep the person around who like could have had the ability to take the easy route out so early, but instead tried to ruffle feathers?
Yeah, well, and the thing is, I think Saul, honestly, because he didn't tell anyone about Rachel that he did it. So I do think that was the right play. Tell Rachel and only Rachel, solidify that bond. But yeah, I was confused, because then a few episodes later, Rachel votes out Saul and doesn't like give him the heads up that he's going. So it was very confusing. And I think this is where I was talking about, like, each of the winner contenders has something pro and against them. I think the fact that they showed this moment with Saul and Rachel afterwards was really big for Rachel's edit, but then Rachel voting against him and not explaining like, hey, I know you saved me, but this is how it has to be.
Right.
That was a little confusing. And I think that's where Rachel might have a red flag in the edit, is only because I'm like, why then vote out Saul if he saved you? Because that makes it sound like it's going to be like this game-long relationship. But then we will get into it, because the very next episode we see like them kind of flesh out Rachel and Andy's relationship, which seems to be a more primary relationship. But Tiana goes home. It's very sad. But I do agree. Like, I think getting out of Tuku now, you just guarantee more numbers at the merge, even though you are, like you said, with Saul saving Rachel, you're pissing off the Tukus. But are you really? I think the problem is Caroline didn't want to send out Tiana, but she very much knew that was the right move. I think she was acting a little bit more torn up about it than she was, because in Gabe, Sue, and Caroline's world, that's actually for the better, because now the Tukus aren't as threatening because you got one out and it wasn't the person you were super, super close with. So I honestly think Saul did them a little bit of a favor, because then they couldn't kind of hide behind and target another Gata next, which then ends up being the case, because then who's the biggest target now that one of the Tukus is gone? It's Sam and Sierra, and we see the next vote play out. Obviously, we see the auction, which is great, but we see Rachel find an idol, another big notch in the belt. But then we also see them leave Rachel out of the vote and vote for Sam and Sierra. And I want to bring up this other moment that happens, because I think this is a bit of an underrated moment where Rachel plays her shot in the dark, not because she thought she was going to go home, but she plays it in order to gauge the reactions of her fellow contestants to then decide if she wants to play her idol or not. And I thought this was a genius move for Rachel. And the good news about Rachel is that she got to explain her move in the next episode, which is a big editing plus. But Sam and Sierra, let's talk about this real quick. Do you think Sierra was the right choice to target? Obviously, we see a tie vote to play it safe in case of an idol. And then in the revote, they vote for Sierra over Sam. Do you think getting out Sierra was the right move in this case? And then what do you think of Rachel's shot in the dark bluff play?
Based on, well, first of all, I think Rachel's shot in the dark bluff play is awesome.
Yeah,
one of the best. I was watching. That was I got to watch that episode with. I was at. Shout out to the org community. I got to go to a wedding in November for Lauren Pratt and Amberlynn Kearney, who is now Amberlynn Pratt, who Dylan and I have both played with in our Survivor Facebook orgs. It was very, very cool. But what was really awesome is that I got to watch that episode of Survivor with my friend McKenna, Haley. Shout out McKenna, Haley, Dylan Hadaba. And we were like, that was the first time I've really gotten to do like live commentary while watching an episode. And again, it had already aired. We were watching it over the weekend, but like something that we talked about a lot was getting out Sierra at that point was probably one of the better moves, especially given her edit. They've been really hyping Sierra up as this kind of like under the radar threat. People were focusing a lot on Sam, but they weren't focusing a lot on Sierra. And that was really being highlighted because Sierra, I mean, like I remember one of her first episodes and one of the first things that we talked about, Dylan, was like her focus on her ability to make fire and like her ability to really like stick out as
I thought she was going to be the
contender.
fire making loser, which is why I drafted her from my fantasy team. And I was shocked when she went home as early as she did.
So what I think, just from my standpoint of watching, what I think is really, really awesome is the fact that Sierra going out in an episode like that, that highlights Rachel. I can't even remember who the people behind that move were at this point. It feels.
I mean,
like
it was. I want to also give
sort of
Andy,
like
Andy some credit too, because Andy is the one who I think pushes Sierra over Sam. I think, which is the difference. And I think everyone wanted to go after the duo. I think it was Andy though who pushed Sierra over Sam because that was the way she talked to him. Yeah.
That was really Andy's redemption arc, the start of his redemption arc. We had seen sort of like this, like Andy's going to do this, Andy's going to do that. Like he's still kind of being dragged along by people, not in a way where like he's doing their bidding, but like people still think that he's just along for the ride. But that's the first one where he really gets that edit where like Sam and Sierra kind of like, what's it called? She's all that. She like he had.
He's all that. Yeah.
He's all that with his. Like that was a big in that episode alone. The two people who really at the beginning of the season, Andy and Rachel, who had kind of like almost screwed each other over in some aspect, and the fact that like Rachel was so willing to turn on Andy, but that's because Andy was really trying to like bond with Rachel so early. He didn't care what happened to her or what people's perception of her was. They really started to turn around, and the Gata really started turning on each other. So I think Sierra going home in regards to like Sierra versus Sam, probably a better move in the long run. You can't let Sam get close to fire. You can't let him get that far because the closer Sam gets to fire, the harder he's going to be to take out. So, I mean, we've got 7 people left. We know that we've got 2 more episodes we've got 1 more episode until finale.
1 more episode until the 2-part finale. So, I'm going to say we have 2 episodes left till the final episode, but it is 1 episode left till the finale. But if it's a 2-part finale, then it's not a finale. It's
call a spade a spade. If they don't get rid of Sam, before 4, I mean, it's their own fault if he wins. But I think like Sierra is a lot sneaky. She's going to be a lot sneakier and a lot more difficult to get out because she's better socially. Sam's got that like charm and charisma, but he's such an obvious target, especially now, like looking at the list. It's all women and Sam and Andy. So there's no way that they're going to let him get further, especially if he doesn't win immunity this upcoming week. I mean, like, what are you going to do?
And for Andy's sake, Sierra, they've also been hyping up this women's alliance thing. And whenever they hype up a women's alliance, I'm always worried because they never work out on Big Brother or Survivor. But because they were hyping up a women's alliance, I think Andy also could see that, like, Sierra has a route with the women. Sam doesn't have a route with anyone, really. So if you leave Sam on an island, you have a more likelihood of scooping him up than scooping up Sierra. Because Sierra's going to be pissed at Andy for getting rid of Sam. And then she's going to want to go for the women to take out Andy. Whereas Sam, he's not going to the women to take out Andy. He's going to Andy to try to keep the men strong against the women. And now, as we see, obviously that's still not working out because Sam is still in some sort of minority. It's like him and Genevieve on the outs now. But even then, I think the best thing that Jeff teased was like these power shifts. And I think this is an example. Sam and Sierra ran that pre-merge. And
Yeah.
now we're here at the merge, and they're the first two people to get voted for once the whole group is there voting together. And I think that's just a testament to the power shifts, but also to Andy being a player who recognized his position on the bottom, but knew he had at least enough inroads elsewhere to make it happen. And I think, honestly, lowering your threat level in the pre-merge, if you can survive the pre-merge with a low threat level, you are custom made to dominate that early portion of the merge. Now, the problem is those players also then become the biggest threats in the next wave. Right. We saw it with like Jesse Lopez. We saw it with Carla. We saw it with a lot of players. And I'm worried Andy might end up being that player that now they're realizing this guy does have game. But the problem is there's a lot of players like that this season. Caroline and Teeny and Genevieve and Rachel, who are these sneaky under the radar players. But the fact is when everyone's a sneaky under the radar player, right, and you only have a few big personalities like Sam and Gabe and Kyle, and even Kyle's an under the radar personality. He just was winning a lot. It is really interesting to see now when everyone is this under the radar style gameplay, who ends up still sticking out as a sore thumb. And I think that's really interesting.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So after that, I'm trying to go chronologically. Also, the margarita curse. Every single person who's ordered a margarita on Survivor goes home at the auction. Kelly did as well. I just want to shout that out. Don't order or don't get a margarita. If Jeff offers it to you and you win it, it's a blind item. Don't take it. Yeah, moving on to the next episode. This is the Saul boot. And this was probably the weirdest boot to me, not because of how it went down. We saw how it went down. Genevieve said, I want revenge on Rome. I want to get out Saul. But it's more so the question of why. Like, we understand how it went down. Genevieve said, I basically need the Tukus. And then when, I forget who it was who lost their vote. Caroline lost her vote. She said, okay, we need at least one more. And that's when she went to Rachel. But then Rachel goes to Sam. Sam goes to Saul, blows it all up. And then I was so convinced that this was going to come back to bite Genevieve because when Sam blew up the plan, I was like, all right, Genevieve's going to get outed and busted. But instead, it just kind of created a hullabaloo hubbub before Tribal. And then Saul goes up nearly and unanimously at the end. And even Teeny voted for him because Teeny knew they were in a rock and a hard place and had to kind of flip on Saul. But I thought this was great damage control from Genevieve to not be the one that everyone's pointing at as like, you did the Saul boot until the next week, which we'll talk about. But also like, I don't necessarily know why Saul was the boot here. I understand Genevieve was close to Rome, but even then, when Rome went home, Genevieve seemed kind of at peace with it. I think this was just an editing flub, in my opinion. I really think if they had hyped up the Rome and Genevieve storyline better, this would have come as a great like revenge moment, and it probably was, but we weren't shown that, so it just felt very out of left field for Genevieve to target Saul. And honestly, I don't think Saul was a too terrifying player. I mean, I think another one like Kyle, like Sierra, where they're sneaky and at the end they can like kind of win over your hearts. But I really didn't see Saul as like a power player on the season, especially because of the Rome stuff. He got his way when Rome went home, but that was a unanimous decision on the tribe. Saul didn't have a part necessarily in running that. And I do think Saul, he's a good weapon to use, but I didn't see him as in control to where I think this was maybe a little early for Genevieve to make that move. And as we've seen now, she's been on the bottom of the 2 votes following.
I mean, I think that's Saul in and of himself as a move was not the problem in terms of like Saul didn't really need to go and it's his lasting effect. I mean, you've just been talking about it, right? It's not so much when we're talking about like power shifts and when we're talking about people's understanding of the game. People often get caught up, I feel like, especially in the game of Survivor, they get caught up with the idea of like, I'm gonna avenge someone who's walked out of the game. And at a point like this, right? And I think this really comes from the fact that like Genevieve, this wasn't Genevieve's only move. What was the other big move?
Ishan was her big move as well.
Ishan, right? Like when you get more than cocky with something, and this is where Genevieve, good player, good strategist, not a great executioner, right? Like, or less of like not a great executioner, but more of like it's like a fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, and people aren't going to get fooled again. And I think she thought that people might fall into kind of the route of like either being fooled again or thinking that like there's no way it could be Genevieve, and that really was the big blunder. You don't need to get rid of someone like Saul, who's not really actively doing much of anything right now. You can use the ability to like get, if you had gotten rid of a bigger player, more people probably would have rallied around. Saul was not a big threat. So when you, I don't want to say waste, but when you choose to target your energy in that perspective, of course people are going to start catching on.
And I think he was a big threat if he made it to the end. But I think the thing that people don't realize in like the modern era, especially, is that you should not be going for the people that are going to be sneaky endgame threats at 10, 9, 8. You
Right.
get out the people who are going to prevent you from winning the challenges, or the people who are very overtly strategizing, the ones who are running the votes. You get
Right.
out Sam, you get out Genevieve, you get out Gabe. Gabe was the right move in the next round
Right.
because he was kind of spearheading these votes. And even Caroline, I thought it was a bad move because Caroline essentially does to Gabe the very next episode what Genevieve did to Saul. It's someone who was completely in her corner, but she just basically was like, you know what? I'm sick of having to play his game, so I'm going to take him out. And I wonder if that's what Genevieve was thinking. She was like, you know what? Saul's gotten his way with the Rome vote, and now again with Sierra, because Saul was the one who pushed Sierra's name for first and foremost. Like, even Andy wasn't 100% sure which one he wanted to go for. Teeny was pushing Sam. Saul's the one who pushed Sierra. So he did
Right.
kind of run a vote at least, but it wasn't like he was making all the moves in the way that like we see someone like Genevieve or even Sam or even Andy now doing. So I just think it's also like it's not necessarily execution of how you did the blind side, it's when you did the blind side.
Right.
I think that's what you meant to say, is because it's like she made the move. Getting out Saul at 6 or 5 is a big move for Genevieve that she could do and say, I did it because of Rome. But that's when you do it 6 or 5. You don't do it at
Right.
final 10, because now you have to go many more rounds with, yes, you're lessening your original tribe's numbers. Now it's just you and Teeny. But because you did that to Teeny, now Teeny's not a number. And now you're on an island, and Teeny's more likely to link up with the others than Genevieve, because she has even admitted herself she doesn't play with her heart, Genevieve, which I
No.
think is cool. It's cool to see a Survivor player separate the emotion from it. And I love that about this season, is that they don't seem to play their emotions into it too much. And the people who are playing very emotionally, like Teeny and like Sue, they're not the ones who have win equity now because they're playing so emotionally. They're not thinking about the best move for them.
Right.
But I think the people who are separating the emotion, like Caroline, like Rachel, like Genevieve, are the more exciting players to see. But it's just a problem that Genevieve is, I think, doing it a little too soon.
Your turn on Caroline is probably my favorite part of this.
Oh, I love it
season.
so much. And I'll talk about why she's now my current winner pick, but we'll get there in a sec. But the next episode obviously is when Caroline does flip on Gabe, and it's not just Caroline flipping on Gabe. I think everyone wants to do it. It's more so Caroline making the decision, am I going to flip on Gabe, but not only Gabe, but Sue? And I think this is something we saw a lot of, potential backlash for, because, obviously Sue is a very emotional player, as I just said. She does not want to vote any way other than who she dislikes. And it's a very tough trait to have in a Survivor player. It's an even tougher trait to have as a Survivor ally who is aligned to a player like that, who is playing 100% emotionally. And that's what Sue is doing. And I think, Caroline, this is the hardest decision anyone's had to make this season. Do you not tell Sue and risk ruining your relationship with her and becoming a target of hers? Or do you tell Sue and risk her playing the idol on Gabe or trying to squash the plan altogether, and then you don't have any sort of resume at the end? Because let's be honest, if Gabe stays and the three of them continue to dominate, people are looking at Gabe as a more overt player than Caroline, and Caroline needed Gabe out in that sense. I immediately was like, I think this is the wrong move for Caroline, but in retrospect, because she was able to do the damage control with Sue, I think it was actually a really good move. But also, we see this whole episode, it's a very interesting boot, because Genevieve and Gabe know they're the votes. It's just they think they are the one who was staying over the other. It was a really cool lead up to Tribal, where you're cutting between Genevieve and Gabe's confessionals, and each one is basically saying, this is the biggest vote of the season. If I survive this, I win the game. If I go home, it'll be because I just played my card too early. And that ends up being the case for Gabe and not for Genevieve, which also then made me think maybe Genevieve is going to win this season, because she had that confessional where she's like, if I survive this vote, I'm good. It's just this vote I have to get through. But then we kind of see that in the next episode. So I thought this was a very interesting breakdown, though. Obviously, there's some votes on Genevieve, some on Gabe, but ultimately Gabe goes home. He says to Jeff, I'll be back. And it was just the most like cringe thing I've ever seen, because I don't think he's coming back, but I don't know. I just think there's so many other more dynamic personalities. I think Gabe was trying to lean into one villain personality that he kind of left all the other shades of Gabe at home. And I think everyone else is getting more multi-rounded personalities. But
do I think Gabe is deserving of a spot on a returnee season at this point, based on who we have overall among like every other season? No. But what I will say is I've continued to think about, why would the editors allow for that to stay in there if there wasn't some sort of relevance to it? And again, I know it's like on his way out, but if you're a good enough editor, which like it's CBS, dude, they don't have bad editors. They could have edited that out any which way they wanted to. So they chose to allow it to stay in. I wonder why. Could mean absolutely nothing, but I'm interested to see if it does have some sort of
I could also see it being the editors totally understanding that Gabe is playing to be brought back, because that's the thing they hate the most. They tell people to play like it is your second time out there. Don't play to get a second chance.
Right.
And I think that's what the thing is. A lot of players, what they do is they make safe enough moves to get to the merge, and once they get to the merge, they flame out and they make these big moves because they think that, you know what, I'll lose this one and be brought back in the next one. War Dog did it a few seasons ago where he turns on Kelly Wentworth for absolutely no reason whatsoever other than to make a flashy move, and then he goes out the very next week. So I think we see stuff like this happen so often that I think the editors, because everyone was cringing at it, I think the editors fully put that in there to make us cringe because he's not getting a chance to come back. That's my inkling, but you could be right. Maybe it's like, you know what, we're going to put it in here because we want people to be excited about the potential possibility of it happening. But I could also see it just being a way of the editors themselves dunking on Gabe and saying like, dude, you're so cocky that even on the way out, you think you're going to get a second chance. There's no way in hell.
Listen,
you know, John Lovett, the first boot of the season, has a better chance of coming back than Gabe.
I was going to say, I don't necessarily think that Gabe's a good bring back right now. I think that it's just my gears turned only because why do you leave that in? Do you really leave that in just to embarrass the guy, or are you leaving it in with the expressed intention of like, hey, or maybe not for nothing, maybe they leave that in to see viewer response, and if people are like, definitely want to see Gabe back, definitely want him back on the show, or ooh, that was cringy, don't think he'll be back, that makes their job a little bit easier, right? Because you could just get rid of that. You could just not have it be relevant to anything that's going on. But they kept it in. There had to be a reason. Maybe that reason is exactly what we're talking about right now, where like they just wanted us to cringe at him and laugh at him a little bit, because why would you say something like that? Why? Or maybe they are bringing it back. Who knows? Like I said, I don't think he should be the first on the invite list. I don't even think he should be like top 10 on the invite list. There's a lot more people who have that spot, I think.
Well, let's talk about some of the people that might have that spot, being, of course, Rachel and Caroline, which I thought this last episode, now that we could transition into it, kind of emerged as like the two to beat, because we're seeing a lot of, and this is something we didn't cover a few episodes back when we were going through it, but like Rachel and Andy, they get this whole back montage of like the two of them, their whole relationship up to that point. I thought that was very odd to put in an episode, especially one that's not the finale, of being like, this is where Rachel and Andy have been every step of the way. You didn't realize it. And I think that was a huge tell that the winner was probably going to be Rachel or Andy. But this episode had me change my mind a little bit, and here's why. Rachel has been saying for weeks now, you know, she wants to be the one, and you even said it in our little chat that it's such a great winner's quote. Like, I want to be the ocean that controls the tide to make the ships point different directions. I don't want to be the captain behind the wheel. I want to be the ocean, making the tides for the captain to try to navigate. And I love that winner quote, and that is a very winner quote. That's why she's still probably like my 1A contender. But the problem is, I think every week now, Rachel has said Genevieve's the biggest threat. We got to watch out for her. And Genevieve has said the same about Rachel. Yet neither of them have acted on the other. And I get Rachel won immunity, so Genevieve wasn't going to try to get out Rachel. But I think it's just interesting that now the past 2 weeks, Rachel has been saying this is the biggest threat and hasn't necessarily gotten her way in votes. But we still see her perspective on the strategy, which is big. Right. But Caroline, who we thought would have been screwed by going after Gabe with Sue, has perfect damage control with Sue. And I think this is where I think now Genevieve is a little bit edged out as a contender, is because when Genevieve did it to Teenie did not reciprocate. Teenie was pissed, and Teenie's still pissed, and Teenie doesn't want to reconcile that with Genevieve. Whereas Sue immediately was like, you know what, Caroline, you're still my number one. She said what she needed to say, and now I forgive her. And that was huge on Caroline's part, because I also think about the whole theme of the season. It's community. And this is the example of Caroline being able to do something wrong, but then still make amends and still get your number one ally back. I thought that was huge. And then if we look at the boot, you know, it was another example of like, do we go after the person who doesn't have immunity because he's the biggest threat, or do we go after someone who's going to be a bigger endgame threat like Genevieve? But we also see this kind of 5-person alliance forming, and they ultimately go for Kyle again over, you know, some of these sneakier endgame players like Genevieve. And I just think it's very interesting that Rachel now 2 weeks in a row has not gotten her way, but Caroline has. But I also hesitate with Caroline a little bit, only because I feel like her edit hasn't been as central as Rachel. Like that whole Rachel Andy flashback has been so big. And then there's Andy. Maybe Andy could win. Like, I really think this is the most wide open the winner contention has been, but I still think it's probably got to be Rachel or Caroline. But at the same time, there are moments where I'm like, maybe it is Genevieve, maybe it is Andy. And I really do think that's what's so fun about this edit, because this most recent round, I don't think they even told us what the right move was or wasn't. Andy told us the right move was to keep Kyle, because the chances of him winning every immunity anyway are so slim. And that's one thing on your resume. There's nothing else there. And I think Andy made a great point. But the problem is, Andy didn't get his way. Right. And Rachel didn't get her way. So it's like the two players who are speaking the most sense don't get their way.
You got to, I think that's really going to depend then on, I'll be honest, I don't remember what I don't remember what the preview for this next week was, but like
Mm.
they didn't get their way. But now the question is, what happens this next week? Do they get their way this week? Because if it's they voice their opinion about why this was not a good move this week, and people don't follow it, and they don't get their way, and then next week they orchestrate the entire thing. I mean, that puts them right back up on the winner. That's what I mean, is that
Right,
like
it's the power shifts. It's so hard to predict.
There's power shifts, and that's why like I don't have a clear winner. I still am pretty like listen, I'm still pretty high on Teeny in terms of like I think that they have a wide variety of things that they still could do, because again, the thing is they're still so widely liked, and there's still so many ways. I mean, at the end of the game, it doesn't necessarily matter how many moves you made. It does matter how you navigated through the game. And I will say what I think about them is that they have navigated through the game probably still the best over. I mean, they've been on the outs of things, but they've never really been on the bottom to the point where they've been worried. And I don't think it's a matter of like being a goat. I think it's a matter of, you don't need to worry about what's happening, or you don't need to necessarily worry about, your stance in the game when you're never the target, right? And not never the target in the way that like they still have a lot of social equity with people. I think the big slash on their equity right now is that like turning on your allies is not necessarily a great look, and not giving them the heads up, or like being willing to like, cut them off so easily is not great. But Teeny's also been the narrator for most of the season. Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing too, is there's still something memorable and useful about the way that they are keeping Teeny kind of still in focus and prominent and prevalent in what's going on, even if they don't necessarily seem to be the one making the moves.
Yeah.
I think where Teeny lacks probably the most is strategy. Their strategy is not, but cool little insight from a good friend, Haley Keener, friend of the podcast, who got to play with Teeny in Survivor Pennsylvania and LRG. Teeny's big thing has always been socially they are unmatched. Strategically, they are certainly matched, right? And that's always been a big downfall. And in the late game, I mean, there's still a lot of time for turnaround. I think that they're probably a lock for the finale, knock on wood. I don't think they're going anywhere.
Yeah, I think Teeny makes finals 4 at least. Like they're either the final 4 fire making loser, or they're a tribal council loser. I really just don't see the winning trajectory, only because even if someone is not necessarily getting their way, it's how the show portrays it. And I think the thing is, the show is very clearly showing that Teeny is on the outs, and she's playing they're playing emotionally when they are on the outs, and it's making us root for Teeny, but it's not showing us that Teeny has any sort of stamp on the strategy of the game. I mean, Keyshawn's vote, Teeny was in the dark. Look at Saul's vote, Teeny was in the dark until the very end when Andy told them. And then even after that, when they repaired stuff with Genevieve, we get this beautiful moment where Teeny basically comes to terms with their gender dysmorphia at the island. Like, this was something that we knew they were non-binary. They went by he, she, they pronouns, all the above. So, we're not misgendering her or them, but the fact that they were coming to terms with their gender on the island was so magical. And then the very next moment, they're pulling up their bag and it's on fire, and they go, but of course then my bag catches fire and I wake up from my dream. And like, it's one of those things where even in the great moments for Teeny, it's undercut by something. And I also feel like that's kind of what's true with Andy, where even if Andy's saying some stuff that makes a lot of sense, but the problem is, I think with everything Andy says that makes sense, there's another moment where it's kind of the Gabler thing, where with the palm fronds, it's like there's another moment where Andy will be annoying someone, or Andy will lose his thing in the shelter and have to dig it out, or Andy will, someone else will say like, that math doesn't make any sense, Andy. And I think that's the thing, is like, if they were to win the game, I don't know if they would show us those blunders and not relate it to the strategy. It seems like a lot of it is related to their personal journeys rather than their strategic journeys. Whereas I think Caroline, Rachel, and Genevieve, everything they've done that is emotional has kind of come back to their strategic regimens in the game. But I do think it is one of those 5. Like, I hate to say it, but I don't think Sam or Sue is winning. I just think Sam is someone who I think now is so powerless that he's going to kind of be a sitting duck. And even if he makes some moves, I just don't know if he has the respect. And Sue is just someone that I clearly can see as like one of the characters of the season, but doesn't win. She's just not giving me winner vibes. Yeah.
It's a good season overall. Not for nothing.
Yeah. Last question. Do you think Kyle was the right boot here? He doesn't win immunity. Do you get him out so you can have a chance at immunity, or do you go for Genevieve, who is, I think, clearly the bigger threat?
I think it really, you know what? This is what I've always said about Survivor from all angles. You can make a lot of, you can't do much to, I mean, you can. You can play bold when you don't have immunity, but it's a lot harder to feel comfortable doing that because it only takes one misstep to put your name down on parchment instead of your targets. So what I do think is when you have the opportunity to get rid of Kyle and you're going down to the wire here, you know that you're, especially if you're a Survivor diehard, which like Survivor's way different than Big Brother. They are always welcoming in fans. It's pretty much always fans. I don't know when the last time we've heard of it being like solely recruits or primarily recruits. When you know you're getting down to the wire, you know you're headed to the finale. You'd rather be there than not. So if you have the opportunity, do I think it's strategically a good move? Depends on who's going to make the next move, right? Like depends on what people are trying to actively make happen.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see, right? Like,
yeah, I think for certain people it works, for certain people it doesn't. For Sam, I think this was a bad move because Sam is now the biggest guy. I think for Andy, this was probably a bad move, but he even acknowledged it. And I give Andy props for that because Andy's saying, you know what? Kyle can keep winning every challenge. But at the end, if you've only won challenges, who's going to award that? If you win a challenge and your back is against the wall, that's when it's impressive. But when you're just winning challenges, like Kyle has not done anything.
Kyle doesn't have win equity.
He doesn't change the direction of the strategy. Right.
No.
Even if but I think the problem is also he has a story. And I think that's the thing. For Genevieve, this is obviously a great move because now Genevieve is safe because it was her. If not, I think for Caroline, this is probably
it's fine.
Good move.
For Caroline, for Teeny, and for Rachel. I think it's just a fine move. I don't think it does anything in regards to like furthering their game. What I really do like, what I wholeheartly believe is that if you're going to take out the primary immunity winner, you better do something with it. You better do something with that. And that doesn't mean that like you take credit for it at Final Tribal Council. You can if you're the next immunity winner. You can if you're now the next person who's consistently winning immunities and you go, couldn't have done that if Kyle was still here. So Kyle, that's why you needed to go. But because I took you out, because Rachel, took you out, I was able to not only hide my hidden immunity idol, hide my vote blocker, control the votes from what was going on. I maintained control of this game from that point forward, right? Like I don't have to worry about anything because I knew with you gone, and as long as I won the next immunity and I could take out Sam, I was probably going to be, smooth sailing from here on out.
Okay.
So it just depends what people do with it.
Right. I do think just for the collective, keep Kyle in, let him keep winning the immunities, so he's just like a shield and a sitting duck, and try to scoop him up as a number. That's my thing. Like I think for Caroline and Sue, especially, Sue did not want to work with Kyle, so I think Caroline's best job is to get rid of it. But if I'm Teeny, if I'm Rachel, if I'm Andy, I would try to scoop up Kyle and make an alliance there against like Genevieve and Sam, and then also against like Caroline and Sue maybe. But I think also they want Caroline and Sue in their pocket because they probably see Sue as a sitting duck also that they could beat. But yeah, either way, it's very interesting because I don't think there's one player dictating the strategy. Because as we've seen, Rachel hasn't gotten her way in the past few votes. Andy hasn't gotten his way, but they're still the main vocalizing strategists on this season. Caroline has gotten her way. She's a little more quiet. She's also got Sue. The question is also like, I feel like for all the winners we've had, we've seen like them as like the core relationship to follow. Like Kenzie, it was Kenzie, Q, and Tiffany. That was the core dynamic that we were meant to follow the most last season. And even Kenzie and Ben being such a prominent dynamic. Charlie and Maria as well. But like I think like that Tuku or whatever it was, the three, I forget their name, the purple three. I keep losing their names in my brain with all these seasons, but the three of them, Q, Kenzie, and Tiffany, that was the story of the season. Same with like Jam Jam, the Tika 3. Tika 3 was a thing. Like that was a thing you were meant to look at. Like even D, her relationship with Austin and the Reba 4, that was like the and D and Julie, like that was the key relationship of the season. And I think this season it's tough because we're seeing two of them. We're seeing Andy and Rachel, who we got a whole flashback sequence of. We saw in episode 1, they had a nuanced relationship, and now it's still kind of coming into play. But we've also seen Caroline and Sue since episode 1 being the main duo. So it really, the question is, like, I think the winner's coming from one of those four. I just don't, and it's not going to be Sue. So one of those three, Caroline, Andy, or Rachel, because they're clearly shown to be the prominent relationships. It's just, which relationship are we supposed to look at as the relationship of the season? Is it Sue and Caroline, or is it Rachel and Andy? Because we thought it could have been Sierra and Sam, and that was blown out of the water. We thought it could have been like Genevieve and Saul. That was kind of debunked. So I really think it's also going to be like, which story are we most invested in? Because even on 41, it was Shannon Ricard, but it was also Erica and Heather. Erica and Heather was a big relationship that we didn't really get to see, but like Xander didn't have that one storyline with another person, or Deshaun didn't have that with another person as deeply as Erica did with Heather, to where like that could have been a tell. But here it's tough because there's two central relationships, you know?
I agree with you. I don't have anything big to add to that. I mean, like that, I think the observation is interesting. The like following the story of like the winner's got to come from that group, because the winner was always going to come from the people that, you know, we were meant to follow and become invested in. I think the hard thing for me with this season is just that, I mean, people say it all. People have been saying it the whole season. Every episode feels like someone new is in charge, and I feel like the last couple episodes are the most consistent because we've seen this like big climb of like Rachel and Andy and Caroline. So it's easy to kind of get focused on them and really like lock in and take notice of them. I think truly, I think this is obviously the next turning point, getting rid of Kyle, the obvious winner of whatever immunity you're trying to go for. So it really is, this episode, I feel like, is going to go one of two ways. They're either going to do the easy route and just get rid of Sam, because nobody really needs Sam right now. You're in your kind of easy factions. It's going down to 6. So someone is going to, you know, someone's going to be in the majority and someone's going to be in the minority. And it's really just going to come down to like, how likely are they to win? I don't think anyone, I'm not looking at Sam as a winner. And the only reason that Sue even is going to be above Sam in my ranking is because she has a way to keep herself safe. So there's no reason for her to not use it if she feels like she's in danger. But I think this episode is probably going to be the most telling in terms of what we are looking for the end game, because I feel like we're either going to see people make or break what the rest of their game is going to be, especially because we're about to head into the finale. And I feel like usually by the time we hit the finale, we know by the time we hit this point, I mean, I use the Tika 3 as my prime example, because we knew we were either getting all 3 of them in the finale, or we were going to see something we were going to see them crumble, and we were going to see some sort of like, kind of like
how Evie, Tiffany, and Xander crumbled. You know, and Xander was the one to come out of it. Yeah, I agree with that. That's a good perception as well. And I also think it's like, I feel like before the finale, we know who the dragon is and who the potential people to slay the dragon are. Last season, we knew the dragon was Maria. And we knew it was going to be either Kenzie or Charlie, whoever slayed the dragon. And it ended up being Charlie who slayed the dragon, but Kenzie still won. But I do think, you know, like even a few seasons ago, I guess it wasn't true with Dee as much, because Dee was kind of the top dog, and Emily had gone out, Drew had gone out. Maybe Mama J was the dragon at that point, because she was
and no one had slayed her. No one slayed the dragon in that season.
Yeah, that was a rare season. But 43, it was obviously, you know, Jesse was the dragon, and you know, Gabler / Cassidy, I guess, slayed him. I don't know.
Yeah.
But even 41, I guess the dragon was Ricard. 42, it was Lindsay. You know, like I do think or Omer, but Omer went before the finale. But yeah, I think this is going to be shaping up where like we're either probably going to, well, I don't want to tip my rankings. We'll get into it in just a sec. But like I think we're going to lose one of the outside players, and then whoever remains of that might be the dragon. But I don't know, because I don't think the dragon is Caroline or Rachel. And that's what's so interesting, is that like the two biggest winner prospects, it's not because they're outward in front like Jesse was dictating all the strategy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so unpredictable. But why don't we get into the rankings just to get into them and get them over with? Because I truly don't know. Like it could go any which way. Like I could see any of these people being the boot. I could see most of these players, except for maybe Sam and Sue, being the winner of the season. Yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting. But who's going to be your number one pick? Who's the safest this season? Right now,
I'm gonna say Rachel. Rachel can block a vote, and she can idle herself in the worst case scenario. And if she's smart enough to try and kind of feel out how people are feeling about her, 4 votes ago at this point, she's the closer you get to the end, you're not going to play. You know, you're not going to chance things just because you're feeling good, or she will, and then she deserves to go home.
Yeah, I have Rachel at number 1 as well, just because, like you said, even if I don't necessarily know if she's going to be the safest, like I think her name will probably be out there because she is a threat, but she has an idol. And I honestly could see this being the episode where they target Rachel and Rachel uses the idol, and then like Sue uses an idol to protect herself, and then someone goes home like collaterally. And I think of all the people Rachel wants out, I think there's 2 people Rachel would probably want out, but we'll save that for later. Who's your number 2?
Number 2, Sue. Again, she's
Okay.
got an idol. It shouldn't be anything other than that. The two of them are the same.
Yeah.
The only reason that either of them should be going home is if someone steals their idol, and I don't think that is what we're going to see happen. So
Yeah, and I don't think you're even allowed to steal it unless like I think you're allowed to like if it's like it's say what's the knowledge is power, I
knowledge is
think it is.
power.
That's the only way you can steal it. You can't just like reach into someone's bag and grab it. So
Or if there's an idol nullifier. But again, I don't think we're seeing that
God,
right
if we
now.
see that, I'm never watching Survivor again. I've stood by it. Not just because it screwed me over in an org, but because it screwed over my favorite player of the 30s, Janet Carbon in Final Five. And if she had won that, she had made that round with her idol, she would have won fire making and won the game. But because she got idled at 5 and then idol notified, I don't even want to talk about it. Number 2, though, I have Caroline. I just think her winner prospect keeps going up. She's such a good strategist, and like I just don't know why anyone's saying like Caroline's the one to go. I think Caroline has done such a good job, even more so than Rachel, of threat management. I don't think anyone's looking at Caroline as a threat. The only one who might have was Gabe, and even Gabe underestimated her, and she got him out. And I think the way she was able to get damage control with Sue was so good. Kyle going home means that they're not just looking at the Tukus as the majority anymore, because now if we look at the majority, it's actually the Gatas again. It's Rachel, Sam, and Andy, because then there's 2 Lavos with Genevieve and Teeny, and then there's 2 Tukus now with Caroline and Sue. So I really think just the fact that they've been able to get out Gabe and Kyle back to back, I don't think anyone's saying we need to split up Caroline and Sue. And I think Sue does have the idol, but I could also see a world where Sue plays it for Caroline. Like I really think Caroline is. I have no reason to believe, especially if Sue and Caroline is the story relationship story we're supposed to be following more so than Rachel and Andy. Then I really, I can't see a world where Caroline just gets the boot here. I just don't. Who's your number 3?
Sorry. Oh, what is happening?
Getting a call.
Sorry, Brian. Sorry, Brian Petty. Love you. Sorry, I got totally distracted. My number 3 is Teeny, and I already kind of went through. My rankings have been very similar over the past couple of weeks, and I don't see a reason to really change it. The reason that Teeny is going up there is because of really. I mean, I outlined it. I don't think there's any reason for anyone to get rid of them right now. Like, and I don't think anyone sees them as a potential threat. The only person who might see them as that maybe is Genevieve, but like, I don't even really think that that's going to be. I don't think that's going to play into anything, especially considering the fact that like Genevieve herself is on the out so hard that I think Teeny's a lock at least for one more week, and then we're going to see what happens in the finale. I think the finale is going to be where things get very dicey in terms of like where to put them, but I just don't think that I don't think we're going to see Teeny as any sort of we're not watching them walk out this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have them one spot lower at 4, but I agree with you for those reasons. Yeah, it's so tough because also Genevieve, even if she recognizes Teeny as the biggest threat, it's been clear the past 2 weeks that Genevieve feels like she's wronged Teeny and wants to make it up for her. And I do think I could see a world where that kind of comes back around and maybe there is this like really wholesome forgiveness moment. Or it becomes like the Jesse Cody thing where Teeny is able to get Genevieve out and Genevieve like shakes her hand on the way out. But I have Sue at 3, same as you had Sue at 2. I just think, and then Teeny at 4. But just because I think Sue, yes, she has the idol. The only thing is like, I just think Caroline's a savvy enough player that where like Sue didn't play the idol when Gabe went home, and they could have easily voted for Sue. So Sue was in the dark. I could see a world where if they want to get Sue out, they can keep her in the dark. But I think Caroline's the factor in keeping that alive. But I just think Caroline's going to play more actively than Sue, to where I don't feel comfortable putting Sue before Caroline. But you're right. Like theoretically, she should be above Caroline because she has the idol. But really, that is the only thing keeping Sue above, because I could also see Sue just always catches stray mentions, I feel like, at times. But now that Kyle's gone, maybe she won't. But also, now that Kyle's gone, maybe they're looking at Sue as like, you know what? Sue got her way. She's got to go. Because power shifts. And right now, Sue's got the power because Sue got Kyle out. It wasn't her move, but she wanted Kyle out, and Kyle's out. So, you know what? Maybe Sue is the next person that they look at in the power shifts. So, like, we got to take her out. But I still have her 3. And then 4, I have Teeny. I just don't see the win equity for Teeny, but I agree with you. I don't think they're not in our finale. I think Teeny is a big enough character to be in the finale. It's just, I see them as the Jake O'Kane or the Owen of the season, or the Xander, where
I always like the
very,
Jakes.
very, very big personality, but like, clearly just nothing they're doing is working from a strategic level. They are finding their way into the right votes now, but like they are not controlling any of the votes. Every time they've wanted something to go their way, Sam, it went Sierra, they wanted, I forget who, Gabe, they got Saul, like, I think that's the thing, is just Teeny, they can still make moves now, but I have not seen it yet to where I'm comfortable putting them as a winner. But they're smack dab in the middle of this ranking, because I think the 3 below them are the only ones that I could see actually getting a lot of like,
Yeah. At 4, I have Andy, and it's really just
That's
because
my 5.
my 4 and 5, I'll just say, like, my 4 and 5 are Andy and Caroline, and the reason more or less is the fact that I can see a winner story for either of them. The problem is I can see a world where they leave in the next episode and they fall just short. Like, I think we're saying that there probably is no dragon. I would say Caroline is probably the dragon at this point. It's just a determination of whether or not they're going to figure that out, because Caroline has had a really consistent story from the very beginning. She's been blunt and open and forward with about everything that she feels, but has very much explained why she is doing things and why she wants it to work for her. And every week it sort of does work for her. Again, like you highlighted the fact that she actively went against Sue and still somehow got Sue to not be so angry or to turn on her, even so far to, like, you think that there's a possibility that she could use her idol on her. And I don't disagree with that. What I will say is the reason why Caroline is so low is because while I see there's a world where Sue might be like, I'm going to use my idol on Caroline, I also see a world where Sue is like, you know what? I do feel burned by Caroline, and I do want to get rid of her, because she had an opportunity to make sure that I wasn't in the dark, and instead of doing that, she betrayed me. And so I do see a world where that's a possibility. And then for Andy, I don't really know what to do with Andy. I think that Andy is the winner of the season, or like the biggest clown there ever was, in regards to just like the way that they're kind of throwing him around, and he's had this like crazy, insane arc, and kind of like you were saying, right? Like that, like Andy, that math doesn't add up. Like they kind of keep making him the butt of every joke. So I do think that they're leaving room open for him to safely kind of go out and us be like, yeah, I can see why, but also, you know, an opportunity for us to be like, wow, Andy really had everything stacked against him and he was still able to win. But because of that, I think I will say my ranking at the 1, 2, 3 spot is, I think they're a lock to make it to the next episode. I don't think Andy or Caroline are a lock to make it through. I think that there is a world where they probably make it through, but they potentially flame out because they misstep, or they played a card right one episode, and that card actually turned around and was the wrong choice at another.
Yeah, I have Andy at 5. The only reason I'm worried is because he is getting this Emily Flippin like trajectory of like really on the outs in the very first episode, but somehow becomes like the driver of the strategy. But the problem is with Emily, we loved Emily by this point. Andy, I don't think he's capturing our hearts, but we are kind of like, wow, he's got game. But it's not like Emily where we're like, we love her. And I think that's the difference. Where like Emily went out in this position in 7th, but it was because everyone realized how lovable she was. I don't think anyone's thinking, wow, Andy's lovable. I think they see him as the GOAT. And I think that boosts his winner chances, because I think at the end, if he can sit there and say all the things he did, it could be I've been comparing him on the Discord to Gabler this whole time, because he is very much getting the Gabler edit, where he's clearly in the right side of the strategy. He's voting correctly. It's just he himself is seen as a little bit of a clown by the others around him. But at the end, they might respect that. They might respect that he still was able to make it and outlast them all. But the thing is, I don't think he's quite Gabler, because I think they still really liked Gabler, and I don't think they really like Andy that much.
No.
But I also don't know why you would vote him out now either, because it seems like everyone wants Andy in their pocket, unless we do see the storyline where Andy has been playing all sides. He even says that. That's either his rooting strategy that makes him a finalist, or it's the thing that comes back to bite him. But I do think if it were the thing that came back to bite him, someone would have said something by now of like, Andy's hanging around a lot of conversations. And even then, I don't think they think he's a big enough threat to go home. So I do have him in the lower half, but like you said, it's because everyone I'm looking at above him, like Rachel, Caroline are my 2 biggest winner prospects. Sue as an idol, and Teeny I think is making the finale. So it's kind of process of elimination. I think the bottom 2, we both have the same bottom 2. I think it's very definitive, and I do think it's going to be one of those episodes where it's those 2, and like they give us a glimmer of hope, but then it ends up being those 2.
It's going to be those 2.
But who's on your bottom spot, Zach? Who is going home of Sam and Genevieve?
I think that Sam is going home, and here's why.
Oh, so you have Genevieve at 6?
I do have Genevieve at 6. So we have the same 6 and 7,
no,
or are you Genevieve on the bottom?
No, we do not.
So
and I hate it.
So here's my only reasoning, right? And the reason that I have Sam on the bottom is just because I feel like if you leave Sam until the finale, the longer it's sort of the Kyle, right? Like if you're gonna get Kyle out, you better do something smart the next episode with it. So like if Sam wins immunity, the reason why I'm a little nervous about having him on the bottom is because I do think he always has the best shot to win immunity, but he's not been winning immunities thus far, and you would think that he would be able to. But I also think that this maybe this is just like what I'm really hoping for
Manifesting,
and what
yeah.
I want. I really want Teeny to kind of have like a come around episode where they're like, you know what? I really tried to get Sam out the last couple of episodes, and I've not gotten my way, and I've been on the bottom, and we're getting Sam out this week. And I would love to see something where Teeny kind of like comes into her own, to their own, as this like master manipulator of like, you know what, Sam may be the obvious choice, but it's going to take someone big to try and get get him out. Whereas again, Genevieve is sneaky, but they know where she is now. Like, I think that's the big thing with me, is that Genevieve should be the obvious choice to get out, but you already had her on kind of a silver platter last week where you could have gotten Genevieve out, but you chose instead to go for Kyle. And to go for Gabe the week prior. So like, you have the opportunity to get her out whenever you want now, and you have people who are going to be able to beat her. It's just a matter of, are you willing to take the risk of getting Sam out now? Are you willing to take the risk of leaving Sam in? Or are you trying to get Sam out now so that you have a better shot at being one of the people who win? Because then really, who's your biggest competitive threat? I couldn't tell you looking at this list, right? Like, yeah, I guess Andy, depending on the comp. I guess Genevieve, depending on the comp. I guess Rachel. I guess Sue. I don't have a definitive. If you leave Sam in and when he doesn't have immunity, you are risking him to go further and to just be an automatic sit. He could win out depending on all of the competitions. Doesn't mean that he will. It just means that depending on the type of competitions, you take a really big risk.
Yeah, honestly, I'm going to stick to what I did because I just think it'd be more fun.
Did I convince you, though?
Game. You did convince me, though, that I think Genevieve actually might be safer than I think, because she's clearly on the bottom. Even Sam, he's been clearly on the outs, but he at least has Andy, whereas I don't really know who Genevieve has now, because her one person was Teeny, and Teeny's done. I think Genevieve realized she made the move too early, but it could be one of those things where, because she did that move too early, people said it was a bad move because it put her on the outs. But is it really a bad move? Because now everyone's like, we'll get her out later. Now she's just a sitting duck. Now she's expendable. If anything, I think Genevieve can spin this. And I really think, and the reason why I still think she could be a winner is because in the last episode, Jeff asked her and she goes, it's the community thing of like, I'm letting my emotions get into it. And Jeff's like, yeah, community. The whole season is all about community. And the people who've been feeding into that storyline the most are Caroline with making up with Sue, with Rachel, who's kind of like stirring the pot and shifting the way things go, but doing it in a very subtle manner because she cares about these people. It's Andy, who obviously was the outsider, who was picked on, who kind of came back and into his own, and then Genevieve. I think Sam and Sue, again, don't really fit into that mold very well, and even Teeny, it feels like Teeny's on a self-discovery rather than in the midst of the community. It's kind of like them kind of coming of their own age, which is just not the theme of the season. But I do think, Genevieve does have that realization that she made the early move too soon. It hurt Teeny and she feels remorse for it, which is the exact theme of the season, to where I could see a world where she comes to the end and she's like, you know what? I did that because if I knew it would be such a bold move that it would put me on the outs, but then people wouldn't target me because they knew I was, vulnerable and expendable. If she can spin it that way, she could be the winner. I'm going to keep her at 7 only because I think for our game, it would be more interesting.
But I've gotten into your head now.
You have gotten in my head. Well, because here's the thing. I want Genevieve to win. She's my favorite. She and Rachel are my two favorites. Caroline a close third, Teeny a close fourth. Like those four, any of them winning, I'd be very happy with. I'd be happy for the story if Andy won. And then I really don't want to see Sam or Sue win. But I really do think, Genevieve's the one I'm rooting for. And I love watching her on the bottom because I can now root for an underdog. But I just worry that it's going to just be the easy vote, so they take it, especially because she is still a good strategist. She was just effortless in her Keyshawn boot, and then with Saul, she made some missteps in telling Rachel that told Sam that outed it, but even then, Genevieve was never in the crosshairs for it. It wasn't until afterwards when everyone was like, you know what, Genevieve pulled off that move. She's a threat. But that was also Gabe putting that out there. Now that Gabe's gone, I'm wondering if they can tone that down. The only problem is that Rachel still has her sights on Genevieve, so I do think it could be one of those things where maybe those are the two that are in the finale. One of them is the dragon. One of them is the one who slays it. And it's whoever gets the other one out first. And it's like a Jesse Cody situation. But even in that sense, Gabler won. So maybe it is Andy. I am so conflicted because there are just so many paths that this could go. And because of the countless power shifts that Jeff is teasing, I genuinely don't know. It could be, maybe Sue makes an idol play and gets out Caroline. And she's like, I betrayed my ally. And then Sue wins. I really don't know.
I think it really is just one of those things where I mean, that's what makes a good season. We shouldn't be able to predict the winner this early on. But also, I think what people love about the season is that there's a reason to root for everyone. I mean, like, you're a Genevieve lover. I like Genevieve a lot. Genevieve's doing a lot for me on my fantasy team. But
see,
also,
my mom doesn't like Genevieve.
But
so
my
it's
thing
like,
is, like, I'm still rooting for Teeny. And do I think that Teeny has way less winner equity than they did when this all began? Yeah, probably. But also, like, I wouldn't be upset if Caroline won. I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't love to see an Andy win, but just for his story alone, I think it would be very interesting because Andy's not had, like, you know, Andy's not had the Gabler edit of, like, everyone, you know, everyone kind of, like, is frustrated with Andy, but he doesn't have, like, an enemy. He doesn't have a rival. And in fact, he's got a better edit, I think, than Gabler ever did, where Gabler was just kind of like, I want Ellie out. I want to get Ellie out. And then just sat around for a couple hundred episodes and then won the season somehow with a great final tribal council.
Yeah.
Andy has really had everyone is against me. I thought I was in good with this group of people, and in reality, they were just using me. I'm going to turn it around. I don't mind seeing that edit. I wouldn't be happy with an Andy win from, like, I'd rather Caroline win for sure. I'd rather Rachel win for sure. I'd rather Teeny or I wouldn't rather a Sue or a Sam win, but I also don't think that they're making it there. I don't think that they have the ability to win. I think that everybody else has such a wide ability to win that whatever this finale is, it's going to be exciting. That's sort of why I want Sam to go out this episode, because I don't want to see Sam in the finale because it's too obvious to get Sam out at 6. You know what I mean? Like, it's too obvious to get Sam out at 6 or to get him out at 5 because you're not leaving him into fire making.
And there's one last thing, and I know you said you didn't remember the preview, but I didn't either. But there was one moment I remember for the preview, and that's Genevieve making what looks like a fake idol. And here's the thing: usually that's a kiss of death, but also I could see this being the season where something like that works. Since the first time, I was going to say
it might not be a kiss of death this year because also you don't want to take a chance. There are three idols, and they're all owned by, or there are 2 idols out there, and they just happen to be owned by original Gata and Tuku. So who's to say there's not a red idol? So it might work, right? Like, it might just happen to work. But that's all going to depend on if people really believe it or not. You know what I mean? Like, if people really believe, because Rachel might be like, this has nothing to do with Tribe because mine came from a burger.
And you remember what happened when Sam didn't play the idol during the Annika boot? He said he was going to use it for a fake down the line. So what if Genevieve and Sam pull out their fakes and say, we're not going anywhere tonight? And then Sue pulls out an idol and she says, I'm not going anywhere tonight. And then Rachel pulls out the idol and says, guess what? I'm not going anywhere either. And then look who's on the outs. Teeny, Caroline, Andy. And then guess what happens? If one of them has immunity, then it's basically like, let's say Andy wins immunity, then it's like Teeny or Caroline, who we voted for.
Oh God!
Like, and I could see a world where they're all like, well, we don't want to get Sareed. Or Andy says the likelihood, he pulls his statistics and he's like, the likelihood that all these are real idols is not true. You know, I could see a world where that happens, where it's just like 4 people pull out idols before they even vote. Like, I'm gonna clip this in case that comes true.
That would be
insane. That would be insane.
I would love to
see that happen.
It would be awesome to watch. It would just be absolutely insane.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, we both agree it's probably either Sam or Genevieve, just because they are on the bottom. But as we've seen this season, power shifts.
It doesn't matter. Anything can happen. Anything really can happen. So
if Rachel's not in our finale, that'd be a crazy, crazy coincidence. And you know what? It would just show that this season's as unpredictable as ever. And I'd be here for it. You know,
I would also be here for it.
Who's your winner pick, Zach? If you had to predict right now.
I would love to go with Teeny. I don't know if I can go with that.
Yeah,
I am going
logistic one though. Yeah.
You said you were going to pick Caroline, and I will tell you that Caroline would be my winner pick right now. Just to spice it up, I'm going to go with Rachel because
I was going to change it. Oh, okay.
Whatever. You know what? Let's say collectively that we have a Rachel Caroline dual winner pick, right? Like this is. I think it's going to be one of the 2 of them at this current point. This week is going to be very telling. We could come back here in a week and be like, by the way, we were so wrong.
Right.
Neither of them are going to win. This episode was terrible for them. This episode was horrible.
I was a little worried. As soon as Rachel was like, we have to get out Genevieve for the second week in a row, and they didn't get out Genevieve, I was like, what? Rachel's not getting her way, but she also had immunity. So, like, who knows? Maybe if she didn't have immunity, there would have been a different style of play. But anyway, my voice is hurting from talking, but also so fulfilled because it's been so great kind of getting our fill on this Thanksgiving weekend. You know, just eating all the great stuff that Survivor is offering. I do have to ask, though, Zach, who has a recipe for reality of this last stretch of gameplay.
It's Saul's vest.
Yes.
Saul's vest, man. Good for Saul, dude. Good for Saul. That the man did very little over the course of his time on the show. He made a lot.
He was a great character. I love
great character.
Yeah.
Not very strategic, not very over the top in that regards, but man, oh man, did he deliver as the snack of the season all of a sudden. Very good. Good for you, Saul.
Yeah.
Good for you, dude.
Yeah, I'm gonna give my recipe for reality to Rachel. I just think since the last time we talked about her, she had a safety without power played on her by Saul. She was able to control a lot of the votes, not hands-on, but making her way, navigating it. She found an idol, a block of vote. I think she's solid, and I do hope she makes it far. And if she wins, it'll be a very well-deserved one, hopefully. I do have to ask though. Yeah,
if we're going with a real recipe for reality, I am going to go with Caroline. Just as I have always been a big fan of her. I was a big fan of her before the season even started, and she has just continued to deliver week after week after week. Yeah. So I am excited at the prospect. I do think she is, for me, solidified probably one of the people I want to see back on a season most of all, because I think that she would be great.
And I will say, before the season, I think you had her, maybe not as your winner pick, but you had her pretty high up, and from talking about her, you made her lower. You said you've convinced me she should be lower. I think that goes to show for future seasons we should never let each other influence.
No, never. We should stick to our guns.
If I had let you influence my opinion on Kenzie, I would have put her lower, and I stuck with my guns, and she won. So I really think in the future, if you have someone who you think is going to win, pick her, because you know what, neither of us know the whole truth. And
no, we don't know anything.
I had TK as my winner pick this year, so that's rough.
I had forgot about that.
Yeah, Teeny's still your winner pick, and they're still around. And
not for nothing, my entire fantasy team is still here. So
yeah, we will give you updates on the next episode. Yeah,
who would have thought? Honestly, I wouldn't have thought. Genevieve and Andy, I got that by chance.
At the point you drafted them too. I mean, you weren't even.
We thought they were gone.
Genevieve
they were going somewhere.
She was invisible up to that point. That was before Keyshawn's boot, so we didn't even know Genevieve was going to be this power player. So yeah, no, I thought that was awesome that you got that for, and they've been doing so well. Sue was one of your first picks, but she ends up being the one who's more of the GOAT. And I just think that's so fun. How things change. But I will say. We did also hear Jeff say that there was at least one person from the season that he has given the call for 50 for. And I'm curious. We know who's still in the game, but I'm curious outside the game who it might be. So I just want to quickly go through each person, and you tell me who is more likely to play on 50. Because I have someone I think they're talking about that no one else is thinking. But I'm just going to go through them right now. John or TK? Who has a better chance?
John, for sure.
I agree.
I think John for sure.
John or Asia?
Oh no. Based on fan reaction, Asia. Based on what they might want, John.
Okay. John or Keyshawn?
John.
John or Annika?
John.
John or Tiana?
John.
Or Rome. Sorry, John or Rome. That's who's next.
That's tougher. You know what? I'll change it. I'll go Rome for that one. Okay. I do think that
I'll keep going with yours then. Okay, Rome or Tiana?
Rome.
Rome or Sierra?
Sierra.
Okay. Rome. Okay, sorry. Oh, Sierra or who's next? Saul.
Sierra.
Okay. Sierra or Gabe?
Sierra.
Sierra or Kyle?
Sierra.
Okay, so you think Sierra right now of all the eliminated players is the most likely to come back for 50?
Yeah, I think. I don't know, man. But if it's Sierra versus John, I don't know who I pick.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so a lot of people are saying it's Rome. It's Rome. It's Rome. But I really don't think so. I think Rome is enough of a person where, I don't think production necessarily wants to deal with Rome for another season. As fun as he was and as great TV as he was also so polarizing that I do think there are other people that fit that mold, like Q, for example, that I don't think they're itching to get. But I will say right now, I think John is actually a legitimate contender because I think Jeff loved John so much, was so pissed that he was first boot. I could very well think, because he announced that he was thinking of someone for 50 before Tiana went home. So it was only Rome, Keyshawn, Annika, Asia, TK, and John at that point. So I think, honestly, he was probably talking about John. But JD brings up a good point. I think Jeff is talking about Kyle. Honestly, after this episode, seeing him hug every single person on the way out and then go to Jeff and he's like, I need a hug from you too, my friend. And he's like, give it $120. I'm like, honestly, I could see Kyle being the one that Jeff's like, without a doubt,
listen,
we're bringing him back.
They better give him a call because they broke his veganism. They broke his
They did.
vegetarianism or whatever it is for some
But
Applebee's wings.
the reason I
So-
did that was to try to emphasize that I think John has like the third best chance of anyone to come back for a future season. But also, I also think like, yeah, I could see a world where Rome or Sierra or Kyle gets the call for 52. Like, I don't think it's limited to one, but I think right now, if I had to guess, I think they were probably talking about like obviously there's the think they're talking about Rome, but I'm glad we're both on the same wavelength that I think there are other people that could potentially.
I think there's a lot of other people who could take that chance, but I also think that Rome. I will agree with you. I think Rome kind of had his like 10 minutes of fame with them. But as a game player, like I guess it depends what they want for 50, right? Do they want heavy gameplay or do they want personalities?
Right.
And or do they want both? Because unfortunately, like I don't think Kyle provides game. I think Kyle provides personality. I don't think Rome provides game. I think Rome provides personality. I think John probably provides game.
Oh yeah, okay.
But we got to see more of his personality is what I was going to say. Right, I think we got to see more of his personality, but they probably know that like dude's strategic as heck. I think if he ends up on a different tribe, he's fine. It's and I guess that's really just the luck of the draw, right? It's just how you end up.
So right now you think TK, Asia, Keyshawn, Annika, Tiana, and
Gabe I think we're not seeing. I don't think
I think Saul has a chance. I think Saul has become enough of like people love Saul.
Yes. Shout out Mammers. You won't watch this, but shout out Mammers. She loves Saul. She's another org person. Yeah. She loves Saul. She lives, breathes, and dies by Saul. She's upset to see him go.
So the question I have for you is, who would you most like to see back on 50 of the eliminated players?
Of the eliminated?
Because I'm not going to say anyone in the game because they have still room to make like some of the biggest moves ever that I don't want to, all the people who've been eliminated that we've seen their full games now, who would you like most to see on 50 of this group?
I would really like to see John. I want to see John actually play because he was someone who we were really excited about preseason.
Yeah. I'm excited about all those first three boots, TK and Asia too. And I was very excited.
I don't really want to see TK back. I was excited to watch him play. I don't need to see him play again. Asia,
I'd like to see Asia, brother.
I think yes. I was going to say I think it will just always be hard for Asia to ever be seen as anything except Asia now, especially with like returning players. So I don't think it's worth it. Yeah. Because I just still don't think she makes it far. I think she doesn't make it far because she's going to be even more well-known than she already was in the community. Keyshawn, I'm okay on.
Annika.
I'm good.
Okay.
I just not a character. I think I'd rather like Jay Maya, and they kind of have that same. They fit that same that archetype.
I will say right now, Saul would have my vote of all the people eliminated.
Yeah,
so I would love to see Saul.
Saul, and then honestly, Gabe. Gabe, I wouldn't mind seeing. I just don't know if he'll go. I think Gabe needs to be put in his place a little bit because I think he thinks he's a villain, and I would love to see him play with actual villains. I really want Sierra to come back because I think that she would be amazing on a season that doesn't have Sam. She was already really awesome on this season. I would love to see her not have Sam because I feel like her attachment to Sam really
I'm going to say right now, worst move of the season so far. I mean, there have been some bad moves, but like most like underratedly bad move was Sierra not cutting Sam when they cut Annika. Because if she cuts Sam, then she goes.
Then there's I was going to say there's no problems for her. There's no problems because there's no way that they're trying to decide between Sierra and Sam at that point, and there's no way she's even on people's radar at that point.
There you go.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Cool. And Joshua, JD says, he thinks there's going to be a mix of old players and new schools. So we'll see. Yeah, I'm really interested to see what the makeup for 50 is going to be. Only time will tell. But I do have to get to dinner. And I know Zach has stuff to do and I have things to do as well. So, but thank you guys so much for listening. We've already said our recipe for reality is all our business. I will have fantasy updates for the next time. We will be on to preview the finale. Do we want to do like an episode previewing the finale, like predicting the finale as a whole? Or do we want to do like predicting just like a normal episode and then do another?
I think we should predict part 1 and then we should come into revisit part 2. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So we'll be back next week for our finale part 1 predictions, and then halfway through the finale we can get on and predict the rest of it. I don't know. It'll be fun, however which way it falls. But thank you guys so much. Our socials are down there as always in the as I said earlier, the description. Vote for the Broadway World New Jersey Awards for Zach for Best Actor, and for Hunchback of Notre Dame and Sunday in the Park with George at Axelrod across the board for other categories. But thank you guys so much for tuning in every week here. And we will will be better next season about planning how to do it more consistently. We are going to try our best. But thank you for bearing with us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.